Morning everyone, it's 10 a.m. Can everyone hear and see me okay? Thank you. Hi, welcome back. It's time to resume the hearing into the examination of the submitted Crawley Borough Plan to 2040. My name's Glenn Rawlings and beside me is David Spencer, and we're the inspectors who have been appointed to examine the plan. Could you please ensure that mobile phones are switched off or set to silent mode? Hopefully everyone is here this morning for the Town Centre matter 8, I think it is. 7, thank you, ahead of myself. We're planning for slightly shorter sessions today, as tomorrow is going to be more of a marathon. So hopefully you can use the time to prepare for tomorrow's longer sessions, if you're able to. The aim of these hearing sessions is for us to understand further whether the plan is sound or not, what changes may be necessary in order for the plan to be found sound. Those who have indicated that they wish to be heard will be able to speak and make contributions to the hearing. I have a number of questions today based on the agenda that's previously been published. If I don't ask a question but you wish to speak or raise a point, that's fine. Upend your nameplate as per the convention on its side, and I'll bring you into the discussion at a convenient point. I'd like to introduce you, or reintroduce you at least, as it's about the 5th time I think we've done this, to Charlotte Glancy, who's the Program Officer of the examination. Most of you know Charlotte from previous introductions, but she does need to give her opening for us.
Thank you. Just a couple of quick things in relation to fire procedure. There are no scheduled fire drills, so in the event of a fire alarm sounding, please leave the building via the main spiral staircase and through the main entrance doors. Once outside, please turn left and make your way to the fire assembly point located beyond the Town Hall multi-storey car park on Exchange Road. If you are unable to use the stairs, please wait in the chamber and you'll be guided by a member of staff to the evacuation lift. These hearings are being filmed and recorded to be later uploaded on the Council's YouTube site. You should be aware that the Council is a data controller under the Data Protection Act. Data collected during a webcast will be retained in accordance with the Council's published policy, and these specific hearings will be retained for at least 2 years. So anyone sitting around the chamber and in the public gallery will be filmed by the automated camera system, and your image may be captured. Therefore, by entering into the room, you're consenting to being filmed and to the possible use of those images and sound recordings for webcasting and or training purposes. There is toilets just out. I think most people in the room know where they are. They're just outside to the left, to the right here. Many thanks.
Thank you, Charlotte. And as always, Charlotte is the main point of contact for any correspondence to us, as she's based here at the Town Hall and working independently for the purposes of the plan examination. For the purposes of the recording and to assist us today, could you introduce yourselves, please, starting with the Council?
Good morning, sirs. My name's Anthony Masson. I'm a Senior Planning Officer at the Council. Alongside me today we have Rob Pearson, Executive Director at Nexus Planning, who've been advising the Council on matters of retail. Clem Smith, the Head of Economy and Planning at the Council. Then we have Ian Warren, who's a Senior Planning Officer in the team, and Kevin Dillon, who's the Urban Design Officer.
Thank you very much. It would help me greatly if you could tilt your nameplates to face me. Thank you. As those of you who were at the water neutrality session in part 1 will remember, I'm not the best with names, so you may be called a variety of things, but hopefully with your names facing me you won't be. Could I hear from that side of the table, please? Thank you. Nice to meet you, and thank you for coming.
Morning, sirs. Rob Kay, Director of Estates for Chichester College Group.
Thank you very much. Apologies for cutting you off there. Right, so straight into town centre discussion then. And the first question I have perhaps Nexus can help, is on the plan's evidence for setting an impact of 500 square metres, an impact threshold of 500 square metres departing from the NPPF's default threshold. And for the benefit of the people who weren't here yesterday, we are referring still to the 2021 version of the NPPF for the purpose of this examination, and the relevant paragraph numbers in there. So just as an opener, I think I'd like just an overview on the current health of the town centre as the council sees it.
Hi there. Yeah, I mean, just in terms of, I suppose it's probably helpful just to kind of explain some of the context, if that's all right, just to the study and the policy approach that we've taken. I mean, I think from the council's point of view, policy TC5, we've drafted that, recognising the important economic but also the social role of the town centre, and we are seeking to retain the position of the town centre as a healthy and competitive centre. We've drafted the policy really to respond particularly to the NPPF requirements to support the role that the town centre plays at the heart of the community. And as you've mentioned, we've sought to define a proportionate local threshold of 500 square metres for impact testing purposes. Through the sort of various different bits of evidence base that we've undertaken, we've sought to essentially look at the role of the town centre. We recognise that it's evolving into having a residential role alongside its principal economic role. So through the work that Nexus have undertaken for the council, we've looked at retail and commercial leisure needs. Alongside that study has looked at some of the needs that have gone into supporting the residential population of the town centre. I think certainly just in terms of an overview of the town centre's health, we know that Crawley, like a lot of town centres, was very significantly impacted by the pandemic. As a town centre, we've had to deal with sort of various different, I think, challenges anyway. Certainly in terms of vacancy rate and how we've been performing against some of the other centres in the southeast of England, which Clem Smith will provide an update on at a point. But essentially, yeah, we recognise the town centre does face challenges. It's a balance, I think. We have a number of shop units. We have a retail core that is performing reasonably well, but I think we would acknowledge that it is a balance as well. We know that vacancy rates have gone up and have been going up for a number of years. There's sort of wider issues. We've lost a number of multiple retailers as well. Certainly in the retail core, that's been the case. We've seen sort of other uses coming in, other main town centre uses that generate footfall, but perhaps they're not that sort of higher end quality retail. So I think the approach that we've sought to progress through the local plan recognises that Crawley Town Centre does have a balance. I think there are a number of units that are occupied. There's also a number of units that are vacant and have been for a long time, and that has gone up. So it's trying to maintain that overall approach to help Crawley remain where it is and build as a town centre, and ensure that the good work that's been undertaken to date hasn't been undermined. At that point, if you're happy for me to, I'll hand over to Rob at Nexus.
That's okay. I just want a little bit more meat on the bones of the general overview first, before I pass over to Nexus. But in terms of, I think the local plan text said it was a 23% vacancy rate at the current time. Is that a healthy figure at the moment? I mean, in terms of the best that we can expect from a town centre such as Crawley, and how does that compare with similar town centres in the area?
In terms of the vacancy rate, I think I'm trying to think of that. I think the most recent survey we've undertaken was January of last year. That has, I think it's now about 12.4% is the vacancy rate for the town centre. Compared to the South East regional average, I think that's coming in at about sort of 13 So I'm just going off memory on that. But I think the message has been that our vacancy rate has been consistently higher than the South East regional vacancy rate. So Crawley has always sort of faced challenges of sort of higher vacancy compared to our neighbouring towns and those in the wider South East.
Do you still consider Crawley to represent a vibrant and healthy centre overall, even in light of the vacancy rate?
I think in general terms it is, but I think it's always been about recognising there is that balance. There's been sort of various different interventions through the town centre strategy to sort of improve the public realm, the vibrancy of the centre. But I think we are constantly balancing that against the challenge where we're seeing national retailers falling away. That's leaving us with not just an increased number of vacant units, but also sort of the large footprint vacant units as well. So there's challenges again there, and in the sense that also potentially breaks up the frontages. So you can potentially lose some of the, I suppose, the continuity of the town centre in that sense. So I think in general terms, Crawley is performing reasonably well. But I think that's always within the context that we've always had a higher vacancy rate than a lot of our neighbouring towns, and there's been a clear message of increasing vacancy in recent years.
Do those neighbouring towns provide a sufficient pull for people to visit as alternatives to Crawley Town Centre or any of the out-of-town uses that are in Crawley?
I think in terms of the sort of the offer of the other town centres, I mean, I suppose it's the nearest town centre is Horsham. That's a slightly different offer because that's more of a market town type use, whereas I think Crawley's more of a sub-regional destination for retail, so people do come from further afield. Again, Rob will probably be able to provide further detail on that from the retail survey. But yeah, I think obviously we do have a number of out-of-town operators as well in the town centre, and I think, sorry, that doesn't make sense, does it? Apologies. We have a number of out-of-town retailers in the town, not the town centre, and there is concerns of the draw that is potentially having as well. And again, that's another reason for suggesting this more stringent retail impact threshold.
No, your comment did make sense to me because I've not seen a decathlon in a town centre before, so there must be some sort of draw there. Okay, Mr. Pearson, hello. I bombarded you with a sort of front-loaded question at the top of the discussion there, and going back to this, the underlying evidence for 500 square metres and the comment from Quad that it may not be sufficiently robust in terms of the work that's been undertaken. Could you tell us how we got to this point and possibly any response to Quad's concerns?
Yes, morning. I think just layering on something Anthony said to start with, we work all over the UK, and that enables us to sort of benchmark Crawley against other centres. And this goes to the heart of what Quad have said and the whole matter, really. But I think when we go around, we see three types of centres. We see the centres that are kind of on their knees. They've been hugely impacted. They were before COVID. COVID's come along and had its way, and there's a huge vacancy rate, and centres are struggling. And in those sorts of locations, local impact threshold is an obvious measure to protect a town centre. We've just finished some work in Derbyshire, ex-coal mining communities, and those sorts of centres are very typical. Crawley's not that. Similarly, you see centres, we're just working elsewhere in Sussex at the moment, Shoreham by Sea, for Ada and one or two others in that neck of the woods. They're doing very well. In fact, actually, they've prospered under COVID because of people working from home, propensity to walk into the centre, and it's actually heightened the kind of independent market, and so we get a lot more independent traders thriving, many more people using their high streets for food, evening entertainment, and so Shoreham's a good example of that. Again, Crawley's not that. Crawley's in the middle of one of these towns which has been most impacted and in our estimation is most vulnerable, because it is big enough to have had the likes of Morrison's and Debenhams, major employers and retailers that have moved out of the centre, but it's small enough to have been first on the chopping block when they've shut their operations. It's also big enough to have quite a quantum of out-of-town floor space, and that's the genesis of the one objector there is to this and County Oak and what they want to do with their retail park. But there are other retail parks. My first involvement with this council was working on behalf of Sainsbury's, actually, so we were looking to extend the store, and there's plenty of out-of-town competition. And so it's one of those towns that we say is very vulnerable for those reasons. It's small enough to be first on the chopping block, as I put it, but it's also big enough to have out-of-town competition. And at a sort of macro level, that's why we think Crawley Town Centre is vulnerable. And honing in on the impact test and the PPG gives us 6 bullet points to assess when we're looking at local impact threshold. And the critical one for me is the town centre vulnerable? That's the wording of the PPG. And for the reasons I've outlined, we think it is. And layer on that, there's no calculation of vulnerability. It's an art rather than a science. But there are a number of indicators which we can refer to, which help with that assessment. The obvious one everyone always thinks of, and Anthony's already alluded to it, is the vacancy rates. And there's 2 measures of vacancy rate, one in terms of unit numbers and another in terms of floor space. And by either measure, since the time of the previous 2010 retail study, there has been a significant increase in vacancy. By unit numbers, vacancy rates have increased from 7.5% to 12.5% over the period 2010 to 2023. And in terms of floor space, the vacancy has increased nearly 5-fold. The caveat to that, to do the objectives point for them, is that a significant part of that would be the closure of the Morrison's store. But even when the Morrison's store is stripped out, there still has been a significant increase in vacant floor space. So by both of those measures, there has been a significant increase in vacancy, which is one indicator. And then I assume a lot of the information we've put in is taken as read, but also to highlight that there has also been a decrease in market share in the town centre. So you'll have seen some of the to and fro, the numbers have been amended as we've gone along, but both in terms of convenience goods, so food goods, and comparison goods, i.e. the rest, there has been a decrease in market share over the period. And notably, one of the points raised by Quad is around the Morrison's store. And actually, when we did the previous household telephone survey, and I should have mentioned that before now, that is the measure by which we understand market shares. So we phone, well, not we, but a third party phones, in this instance over 1,200 local households to get a really good grasp of everybody's shopping habits. And when we last did that in 2019, the Morrison's store was still open. So the figures that we show of an already declining market share were pre-Morrison's. So the fact that Morrison's then shut afterwards will only have decreased market share of the town centre further. So that's an important point and goes to one of the points that Quad have made. So those are the measurables. There are also, we've put in our evidence about market rents decreasing. We've talked about market yields increasing, both of which are negative measures. So the big picture is that all the indicators we've looked at are on the slide in Crawley. Is that typical of most town centres? Yes, it is. Crawley's not wildly different to the issues many town centres face. We're not putting it in that Derbyshire bracket in my phraseology. it's not a centre that's on its knees, and you struggle to see where it's going to progress. But what you do have in Crawley is that vulnerability I've talked about, where it has the massive out of town, which of course is the heart of the County 8 objection, really. Another relevant factor, which I'll just touch on because it also links into the quad work, is one of the PPG indicators is to look at the size of unit in the town centre versus the potential competition from out of town. And at figure 2.1 of our matter statement, we set out an analysis of unit sizes. I won't go through every line of that, it's in the evidence. But what in our estimation it shows is that Crawley has an average town centre unit size at the upper end of what you might expect in most town centres, i.e. it has quite a number of larger units for a town centre of its size, and that brings it more into the focus of the out-of-town market. And actually, so you mentioned, for example, Decathlon can find a unit here, and one or two others. I noticed DFS in County Mal. So that's good in one sense. You've got the ability to attract some of those retailers in, but it does also mean there's an interchangeability between in-town and out-of-town, and that's why the unit size is relevant. And actually, again, going to the heart of what Quad, on behalf of their client, are saying, when I look at what the history of County Mal is, they mention in their latest work about sort of, well, we're looking to get a 2,700 square metre food store, and you should take account of that. It wouldn't necessarily come into the town centre. But when you scratch beneath the surface, as I understand it, perhaps officers can allude to this further, what they're actually trying to do at County Mal is have a flexibility of permission so that the 2,700 square metre food store can be pepper potted effectively. You can take that floor space and pepper pot it across the retail park. So it seems to me that actually makes our exact case, because they could have 5 divisions of 2,700. Now, if they all went out of town and you didn't have an impact threshold that allowed you to consider the potential impact of that, then you'd be missing out, because they could, and arguably should, under town centre first policy, be coming to the town centre. So I'll perhaps draw a line there, because I've said quite a few things and there's lots of more detail in all of this. But I think that's the nub of the case, really. Quad have raised a number of technical queries, which I'm happy to take one by one as well, if that's helpful.
Thank you. In terms of town centre units, do they have sufficient flexibility to alter to future demands, in your opinion?
Do you want to? I'll let Anthony start on that one.
Yeah, sorry, just before I do that, just a very quick clarification. I think Rob referenced County Mal, but I think he meant County Oak Retail Park. So just, yeah, we have two quite similarly named things. So one's County Oak's out of town, County Mal's in town. So just. And
that was in relation to the 2,700 square metre food store.
That was it. Yeah.
Sorry if I said County Mal, that was where I was talking about DFS. They have a unit in County Mal. That's what I was trying to get to. Sorry. Yeah,
sorry. Just in terms of the flexibility, we're probably going to touch upon it under the second question, but I'm happy to sort of bring it out now. The way we work the policy in Crawley, we have the primary shopping area, and within that we have primary shopping frontages and secondary shopping frontages. Within the primary shopping frontages, I suppose that's your traditional, what was the retail core essentially. So within that we have a flexible approach that allows for effectively your main town centre uses, so your use class E. Then we have the secondary frontages. They are typically at the more peripheral areas around the edge of the primary shopping area. Within those, there's greater flexibility. So again, there's flexibility for other uses, particularly sort of you have your takeaway uses, your drinking establishments. So there's more flexibility within that. The rationale behind the approach again is trying to retain that kind of retail core in the heart of the town centre, whilst recognising that some of the units that are towards the edges possibly need a bit more flexibility. And again, I think there's a recognition that with your sort of your takeaway uses or your drinking establishments, etc., then they're not always going to be open during the kind of the daytime hours, or certainly the early morning at least. So again, it links into having that sort of that activity in the main town centre in the daytime, and the recognising that some of the areas towards the edge of the town centre are tending to be the focus of the sort of more of the evening nighttime economy, but also they need a bit of help with flexibility, I think, as well. But I think with all of that, I should caveat that the policy is not applied in a prescriptive way. So there is flexibility within that. So were someone to say wish to have an alternative main town centre use in the primary shopping area, we would basically ask them to demonstrate that it adds to the overall vitality and viability of that centre, of that part of the centre. So it's not a no at all. It's there's a particular retail focus within the primary frontages, but there is flexibility for other main town centre uses where they would generate that footfall and add to that overall vibrancy.
And in your view, does the capacity of Crawley, in terms of its larger units, make it more vulnerable in the future to, for example, if those larger units attract chain stores, if their withdrawal was to have a larger than average effect on the vacancy rate in the town centre, for example?
I think what we've seen is we are seeing a number of larger units that have become vacant where we've lost some key national retailers. It is harder because I suppose in one sense you don't necessarily always have someone looking to come in and fill at that same scale, given the way that retail's changed to a degree. So oftentimes you'll be looking at whether there's a desire from the owners of that unit to subdivide into smaller units potentially. But again, I think it probably draws back to the point that Rob was mentioning, is that we have seen a loss of some quite significant retailers, and that has left the town with some sort of fairly large footplates essentially that haven't necessarily come into any use since their previous occupiers vacated.
Thank you. And Mr. Pearson, a drop between 2,500 500 seems quite large on the surface of it. How did you arrive at that exact figure? What was an interim figure considered?
Yes. So there's no calculation to get to an impact threshold. Obviously, the only black and white figure is the 2,500 figure in national guidance. And picking up the examples I talked about elsewhere, we've applied a range of, or come to a range of different figures across the UK. The reason we suggested 500 square metres here was based on two things. It was based on the average unit sizes, which we talked about, so specific to Crawley Town Centre, looking at the types of unit size which we felt would impact. And secondly, it was based on, secondly, it was based on a modern assessment, if you like, of the types of floor space which retailers are bringing forwards at the moment. So gone are the days in 2010, 12 where you'd be looking at Tesco's and Sainsbury's and Asda bringing forward sort of 100,000 square feet stores, or 10,000 square metre stores to keep it in metres. What now the market is looking at is, it's, you know, if it's a food store, which tends to be the predominant market at the moment, it's your Aldi's, Lidl's, Home Bargains, etc. And they're bringing forwards the sort of more discount stores, which tend to be pitched around 750 square metres, 1,000 square metres in that bracket, which we feel those sorts of stores would have the potential to impact on Crawley Town Centre. So we've pitched it or suggested pitching it at a level above what's traditionally known as the Sunday trading laws type unit, which are the ones which aren't restricted by hours, and they're around 350 square metres. So, for example, if you look at keeping it with food stores, if you look at a Tesco Express or a Sainsbury's local, they're around 300 square metres. So we're not necessarily saying a store of that size would harm the town centre, but we do feel that town centre is vulnerable to the likes of a discount food store coming forwards, which are typically at 700-800 square metres. So that's why we arrive at the 500 square metre mark.
Thank you.
Thank you. Just to introduce myself, David Spencer, the other inspector. Just on the submissions from Quad, and I think a point raised by both Mr. Masson and Mr. Pearson, in terms of whether the vulnerability of the town centre is potentially skewed by just one or two particularly kind of notable vacancies, I put my teeth in, and in particular the Morrison's outlet, which I think closed in 2019, and then probably more recently, am I correct, is it the Debenhams in the County Mall? I just don't know from the council's perspective, those sites, is there any indication or any kind of signals that there is interest or kind of any kind of movement that might see either of those those particular kind of notable kind of town centre vacancies come back to a town centre use and therefore kind of perhaps strengthen Crawley Town Centre? So it's Mr. Smith or Mr. Masson.
Thank you, sir. I think I can answer or attempt to answer that question for you. In terms of the experience, anecdotally, we've had speaking to landowners, developers associated with those sites. For various reasons, the ability to secure an alternative tenant within the space is actually quite complicated because of the lease arrangements that are specific, for example, to the space that you've got on the high street. And the question is really as to whether the marketing of those sites are actually not attracting the larger investors, unfortunately. A lot of them are focused very much more on smaller units and smaller spaces. And it appears that those units are considered to be, at the moment, too large to attract investment. And the current scenario really is that there needs to be some investment in structural improvements to the town centre to be able to attract the investment of sufficient critical mass to take on those spaces. So yeah, and the nature of the lease arrangements at the moment, just outstanding vis-a-vis the supermarket investor means that just can't happen.
Great, thank you for that. We'll probably come on to kind of other investments and what's potentially happening, what's happening in the town centre through the town centre fund and other sources in due course. Thank you.
Thank you. In terms of going back to the primary and secondary shopping frontages, does the local plan consider residential to be a town centre use?
Thank you. It basically the frontages apply at the ground floor level, but through the local plan, I think we recognise the role of residential in the town centre. So the policy approach is supportive of that, certainly at the upper floor levels in particular. I think certainly one of the issues that we've had to grapple with is how the town centre evolves. So the focus is very much at the ground floor level, is retaining that active frontage, the commercial units. It's having that, recognising that the town centre is designated in the plan as a main employment area, so precisely for that commercial function that it has. But I think at the same time we recognise the way the town centre has evolved. It's becoming a neighbourhood in its own right. Through the Nexus work and through the local plan, we're looking at sort of the facilities that are potentially needed, and we have a policy in the plan to allow for some of those facilities to support the residential population of the town to come forward through the flexibility of the plan as well. But essentially, there is recognition that certainly the upper floors of above the main shopping area have an opportunity for residential. A lot of those are underused, and we've seen quite a significant swathe of residential coming forward on upper floors, and there's still a number of opportunities. So that there's a general policy support for that. There's also particular sites which we'll touch upon later, I'm sure, within the town centre, which have been identified for mixed use and with a residential focus as well. So I think in terms of the town centre itself, I think the focus of the town centre policy is ideally to support that commercial focus at the ground floor level, to have that activity, but recognising that at upper floors there is an opportunity for residential to come forward as well.
Is policy TC1 sufficiently robust in your view to prevent any residential development at ground floor level on identified frontages?
I think certainly it takes it as far as we can in terms of planning policy. I appreciate there's obviously there is permitted development rights that are in place as well that would potentially allow it. I think there are concerns about that. We've introduced Article 4 directions in a number of the main employment areas, which I think we've touched upon, but essentially because of our concerns that residential is not appropriate in those locations because of the lack of supporting facilities, etc. I think the steer from the government has been that actually it's harder to have an Article 4 direction in a town centre because there is that recognition about the sustainability of that as a place to live. So we're, excuse me, my throat. We're trying to manage that as best we can through the planning process, and the policy sort of sets out where we would want the residential to be directed to in the town centre, and the plan does do that. We also have, there's a policy on active frontages as well, again trying to keep that activity in the town centre. So I think the plan does sufficiently deal with the commercial focus of the town centre. But at this time, we're not, as a council, proposing an Article 4 direction in the town centre because of the direction of sort of national policy, and also the role of the town centre in helping to meet some of our own housing needs as well.
Thank you. Looking a little later in the plan then to policy TC3 and potential windfall sites. Is there much capacity within the town centre, looking at the town centre as a whole, and looking at any development that's already occurred as a result of changes to use through permitted development? Is there much capacity for that to occur in the future?
Yes, thanks. I'll pick up this one. So yes, broadly speaking, so within the plan, you'll see we've got the kind of key TC3 sites. In addition to those, there are other town centre sites that are identified in policy H2, and in addition to those, so there are the allocation sites, and also there's the town, also within H2 there's the sort of town centre broad location, which is where there are some identified sites which are sort of indicating a certain level of development capacity. Over and above that, we do anticipate as well that a significant proportion of the windfall development that we're anticipating across the borough as a whole over the local plan period will take place in the town centre. For the purpose of the transport study that we undertook and the allocation of sort of trips associated with that, we included an assumption that 60% of the total windfalls would occur in the town centre, so that equates to almost an additional 1,000 dwellings. We do think, we do think there is the potential for that. We've got the compact residential development study and the design policies sort of falling out of that or building on that kind of provide the framework in terms of promoting high densities, and we've got the H3 policy, H3 typology policies as well that try to capture the different types of development that we would expect coming forwards. I guess these windfalls could take a number of different forms, really. There's sort of areas of land within the town centre where there's potentially scope for infill, but also there's likely to be scope for kind of upward extensions to some extent, where there's a sort of existing buildings as well. We do have 2 conservation areas now within the town centre, which are something that sort of needs to be kind of factored into that thought process. But and I guess the High Street conservation area is more kind of similar to what you'd find in a market town. So perhaps the potential for kind of bulking up the kind of built environment there is perhaps moderated by the nature of the more historic fabric there. The kind of Queen Square and Broadway conservation area is sort of more reflective of the new town style. We do, that's there is a sort of one feature of that is a sort of these horizontal kind of street frontages, but we do envisage that there will be potential for further residential development. We don't see that as being a kind of absolute constraint on potential for upward extensions. There's a concern, I suppose, that it doesn't happen in a very fragmented way that leads to a kind of unattractive looking physical environment compared to the planned environment that was originally put in place. But we would be supportive of the right kind of design proposals there as well.
Thank you, that's very useful. Just going back to my permitted development point, has Crawley been subject to much town centre change of use in the past through permitted development?
There's been quite a bit, yes, I suppose. I mean, we've sort of discussed in previous sessions that there was an over-delivery against the previous local plan housing requirement as a result of addition of windfalls, particularly in the form of office to residential conversions. Probably the majority of those weren't, in fact, in the town centre, or maybe perhaps 50-50, something like that. So the ones that we had in the town centre, they took different forms. I suppose some of them were conversions of the upper floors of buildings that were sort of retail type uses on the ground floor, but others were conversions of older office buildings into flatted developments. For example, there was the Stoner House development opposite close to the leisure park. That was about 130. That was probably the largest of those in the town centre.
Thank you. And is there anything coming forward that you've been made aware of?
One other development that is sort of currently underway and close to completion is Belgrave House, close to the station. That's another development that's converting from offices to residential and doing a kind of infill extension at the ground floor. And there's another there are a couple of other schemes going on that they're not permitted development schemes. In fact, they're planning permissions, but in the Queen Square area for residential development at the upper floors, including an element of upward extension in at least one case, I think.
Thank you. Just on the conservation point you raised, it's just a conservation area. It's just a minor point. The representation on 1 to 5 Queensway and 48 to 52 the Boulevard suggested that conservation areas were perhaps overly restrictive on developing town centre properties. Is that your view?
Not really, no. I mean, there conservation areas in town centres, I would say, are fairly common, and the conservation area that we've designated recently in the sort of Queen Square and the Broadway area, I guess one significant characteristic of that is a sort of a modern form of design and architecture. I mean, there are certain features of that in terms of the sort of massing that would require careful management, I suppose. But we still think that would leave significant potential for further development.
Sorry, if you can hear me. No, just a small point to add. There, as Ian just alluded to, there is more flexibility in the second conservation area, obviously, than the first, the High Street conservation area. It's a different character. It's a different piece of structure, and a lot of the new town heritage is very much, it's to the facades and the form and the shape, so there's a lot of scope for flexibility to the rear of those buildings, and no two sides are the same. So I think what we have allowed in the town centre so far shows the flexibility for that area, and each site should be looked at on a case-by-case basis, and hopefully each application or windfall potential site would come forward with proper study of character on its own specific site and understand how that fits within the setting. But there is more flexibility in that area for potential.
Thanks very much. Looking at the town centre first policy now then, I note the modification that has been presented in terms of the additional paragraph. I was just wondering if consideration was given to any of that paragraph being made part of the policy text to help with the protection of the town centre.
Thank you. I think one of the challenges we have is that policy text. We think it's helpful to provide the clarification, but I think oftentimes what you'd have is it would be a condition that would be proposed with any planning application. This is the movement within Class E, I think we're talking about. I think, yeah, with that modification, I think it's certainly useful in the plan to clarify that that's what the council would be looking to do. But my understanding is that it's difficult to refer to specific conditions within the policy. So the intention is to really flag it as a tool that the development management team would look to use. Again, that's recognising that you don't want sort of through the back door development out of town that could subsequently change within use class E and impact upon the town centre. So oftentimes we will be looking to put a condition on that, but again, I think it's just worth mentioning as well that the movement within use class E also has other potential implications. Excuse me, particularly in terms of water neutrality, where an applicant may demonstrate something is appropriate. One type of use is appropriate in water neutrality terms, and that condition is necessary because another use within use class E could be more intensive use of water and could undermine sort of that element of the strategy. So I think frequently we would be using conditions to recognise the scope for movement within use class E, but to plan for the fact that may not always be welcome or may undermine other elements of the plan, including on town centre vitality and viability.
Thanks. And on the point of conditions, existing uses in the out-of-town centres subject to conditions to prevent any movement between uses and any potential threat to existing town centre uses?
Sometimes, yes. So basically, when it gets to that, you're sort of relying on if there were particular conditions imposed before this permitted development right came in. So there are examples up at Manor Royal where there are uses, particularly in what's called the buffer zones of Manor Royal, which are the areas that are nearest to the residential. So they will frequently have conditions on buildings within those areas because it was restricting the type of use that was allowed. So it was sort of your less intensive uses. So there's examples of offices that have a restriction restricting them to office use. So where someone's subsequently come in, there's recognition that the Class E movement doesn't apply. So we do have some pre-existing conditions, and I think certainly since we've become aware of the sort of the implications of Class E, our development management team have been looking to put conditions on units that are particularly out of town, but also recognising sort of the wider implications for water neutrality of that freedom of movement.
Is there any restriction at County Oat, for example, or London Road retail centres?
From memory, I'm doing this, so Quad may correct me, but essentially my understanding is that the County Oak has permission for comparison retail, and I think what it does, and as Mr. Pearson mentioned, there is I think around 2,500 square metres that has permission for convenience use, which they are looking to sort of that's for one particular unit on the park, and they're looking to use that, I suppose, flexibly across the park, so that can be used. But there is quite a complex history to it, and I think as part of the current application at County Oak, they're essentially looking to reset the planning permission almost, so there's greater clarity as to what is and what isn't allowed, because there's various different restrictive conditions as to how things can be used. So I think that's part of what Quad or the clients of Quad have been looking to address through the current application.
Thank you.
Thank you. Slightly sort of jumping around, but if we can just come back to MIQ 7.4, and it's probably item agenda 5 in terms of optimising town centre development. So I just want to come back to the issue around the ability or the capacity of the town centre as a key location for further housing delivery, and the council's evidence in terms of the compact residential study. You've obviously got policy H3 dealing with the town centre typology around the 200 dwellings per hectare anticipation or kind of figure that's been identified, particularly where you're close to Crawley Station or to Fastway bus stops, and whether that's a reasonable kind of density assumption to be applying within those parts of the town centre. We've touched upon the conservation area, but are there other factors that need to be considered that may impact or not the kind of the reasonableness of that? I mean, we've got some, I think, issues around how high buildings can go in relation to Gatwick Airport. So I don't know if there are other potential factors that may influence achieving that 200 dwellings per hectare figure, or whether the council's assured through its evidence base that, you know, there's a reasonable kind of prospect that can be achieved.
Yes, I'm happy to take that. Yes, sir. You've touched on just the issues that are affecting that figure. It's conservation stroke character, heritage stroke character, and the GAL limits. But as earlier mentioned, just on heritage first, there's those two versions of heritage. As you go further west, you could say there's a crude change in height, the more market town area than the new town area. But definitely, as you move into the new town area and move further east, it's a very different scenario, as you can see with the building we're in now. This is purely in character terms. You're moving further into less constraints because there's the heritage issues are different, and the character issues are different. The 200 minimum is flexible, but it's to try and encourage as much efficient use of land as possible in the town centre for the reasons we know, to do with the fact that it's so well connected. It's an area where you can have relaxation on car parking use or car use, hopefully car ownership as well. And that's not specifically what you asked, but that is one of the major reasons why we're pushing for this. It can not only physically maintain it, but the infrastructure is here. We've also got the infrastructure that the neighbourhood facilities are improving all the time in the town centre. So two massive limiting factors are already on a plate for us in the town centre. The infrastructure is there. Now, when it comes to heights, there is limits that GAL have, and actually I was going to come to this in matter 8 later, but I can just touch on it now, but I think we'll come back to it later on as well. But there is clear precedent in the town centre that 10-storey buildings have been built, which is roughly considered to be an established success further east in the town centre. There's quite a few schemes around the station as well that have been granted permission to this similar height to this building. But anything that is over 15 metres in the eastern half of the town centre does still have to go through the GAL process. And again, it's very clearly laid out and it's quite specific. But we are confident. Now, in addition to that the height that has been achieved, say crudely 10 residential stories, which is about 30 metres. In theory, there could be a higher building than that. GAL has not said no, but that hasn't been tested yet, and it would have to be. It's very unlikely that Crawley would ever become, say, like East Croydon or Isle of Dogs type of high-density location. Mainly, forgetting about character issues or viability issues or whether people will want to buy those units, the GAL restriction is very likely to kick in, but has not been tested. There's been no application for that. I don't know if that answers enough for now. I can expand more if you need.
No, thank you. That's helpful.
In terms of the point you raised on parking limits, then I recognise the zonal approach to parking in Crawley, but is there any appetite for car-free development, particularly around the station, or is it recognised in Crawley that there will always be a desire, at least for a segment of the population, to own a car?
Well, there is a desire, and some schemes have been developed already on that basis, plus a number of grants, schemes that haven't broken ground yet. And just 1 second, we have this flexibility. I'm just going to refer to my notes here. Policies do allow for flexibility in car parking provision, purely because we have the sustainable transport infrastructure in place. Of course, developers can offer car parking, but it's the matter of, do they think it's worth their while? Will they be able to get that money back when they sell the units? So on a case-by-case basis, developers will make those decisions. It's expensive to build an underground car park. It's less expensive to have a surface car parking decked over. So there's many, the plan offers flexibility for all versions. And there are shared, the car share schemes are encouraged. I'm just trying to read from the relaxation as, and flexibility. It's outlined first in CL4, but and the car parking standards, they're set out in the parking standards annex, of course. But then, as part of an application, the travel plan and the transport statement would have to justify on a case-by-case basis the proposed parking levels, and that may include a suggestion for contribution to car share. I'm actually not sure if we have car share working yet in the town centre. That's across many schemes, but there's two, isn't there? There's two schemes I'm aware of. Car club, yeah, sorry, car club, yes. Just to say that Fastway makes such a difference in the town centre, connecting to the major employment areas in Manor Royal. I mean, it'd be very hard to justify wanting to use your car every day because it's such a good service. And then, of course, Crawley train station brings you further afield. So if you just had a car share scheme on its own, it wouldn't be sufficient, but it's the public transport infrastructure that really offers people that alternative. And they may still own a car, but they'll be very much encouraged not to. They'll have a very viable alternative. And that's something that's very rare outside of London or other large cities in the UK. Crawley's very lucky in that respect.
Sorry, I'll just add to that in recent years as well, we have permitted a number of residential schemes with not always car-free, but quite low levels of parking. Just to give a couple of examples, we referred to it in had a question about car parking in the station site. Question 7.6. We have the Mocha scheme has 0.11 spaces per dwelling. Geraint Thomas House, which is part of the land north of the boulevard, allocation has 0.23. So we do have a sort of track record of this, and you know, we are receptive where there are sort of credible proposals and travel plan measures to having much lower levels of parking than you would get from just a sort of blanket imposition of the parking standards. Yes, Kevin's mentioning to me the scheme on the Broadway, the sort of tall, relatively new scheme called the Broad Gate, I think, and that I think that potentially doesn't have any parking at all associated with it. No, Clem confirms there's no parking with that.
Thank you. And in sticking with the station then, to what degree are you engaged in partnership with Network Rail in shaping that station precinct? And the specific point that we raised was looking at any replacement parking if necessary.
Yes, thank you, sir. I can confirm we have an ongoing partnership with Network Rail and with Aurora, who is a private developer that leases the site from Network Rail on a long-term basis. And that partnership remains in place. There are plans to redevelop the site next along the railway to deliver 306 new residential units. That has a resolution to permit, subject to water neutrality being confirmed. In addition to that, thanks to that partnership, we've been able to work with Network Rail to unlock £6 million of investment to upgrade the quality of the railway facilities at Crawley Railway Station. And the plans are to proceed to a next stage, which is to invest in the public realm, in the environs of the railway station, and improve the connectivity for pedestrians and cyclists between the railway station and the broader town centre.
Thank you. Does it involve any replacement parking at all?
There is no change to the parking provision for the station. That is being retained. There will be some improvements made to, for example, taxi rank access and the ability for taxis to access and egress the site, and also the ability for vehicles to access and egress the site.
Thank you. Crawley College. Or would you prefer a break? We can go straight on to Crawley College if you... Let's do that. Okay. Presumably you've seen the amendments to, or the proposed modification to the Crawley Town Centre, or the policy TC3. Could I have your views on those, please?
Got green on the bottom. Sorry, Charlotte.
I think they're not fixing properly.
Okay, thank you. Can you hear now, sir? Can you hear me now? Yeah, I can. I can answer about the modification change. Would you like me to deal with something separate under question 8 about the wider site and the context? How would you do that now or later?
No, that's fine.
Okay.
We can be flexible.
Okay, so the reason we thought it would be helpful to attend today was just to provide further context, and also with my client, about the wider site allocation. And it's very clear from our representations that in principle we support the allocation of the site, particularly under the town centre policies and the discussion you've had this morning about higher density development and the availability and deliverability of the site. Directly, if I may, first of all, in response to your query about the modifications, what I think is important is that the college themselves are needing and wanting to stay investing in the town, in Crawley, and provide a fantastic further education facility. It's very clear to all parties that they do need to amend the fit-for-purpose buildings that are on the site. It's a very dated site. And the whole planning and master planning process that the local authority and my clients have been investing in over the last 2 to 3 years enables us to be able to demonstrate a clear distinction where education investment can occur and then where the opportunity in terms of disposal on the northern part of the site. So there's a clear parameters in terms of the space, but also the type and style of provision that would come for the education investment as a result of the disposal of the northern part of the site. The specific wording indicates that there's a number of underutilised space. Whilst we wouldn't dispute that there's underutilised space, what we would suggest is that there's a tinkering to the wording that demonstrates that actually the majority of the site as it currently stands is not fit for purpose, and that's why it's underutilised. So the building condition on the majority of the site, there are water leakages, there are issues with electricity, there are water leaks that are affecting us in terms of wider issues of design, water neutrality. So it's not just that the site now is underused, it's actually that there are maintenance and operational issues that are resulting in the concern over the provision of any educational facility on that site. So I just thought that was helpful, hopefully, sirs, to explain that context. I think we would like to take the opportunity to thank Crawley Borough Council for their joint working on the master plan. I think it's been a very important opportunity for us to sit around the table and understand, as I say, both the extent and the opportunities that are available on the southern part of the site. And just really to update you, sirs, if I may, there is a current application that is in front of Crawley Borough Council, which is the college's next commitment for an Institute of Technology. We're currently waiting validation, but it was just submitted before Christmas. So again, it's the evidence of joint working under the One Public Estate banner in association with the Crawley College, Crawley Borough Council and West Sussex County Council. But it uses the site to maximise opportunities for the town, for the college, but also builds on the platform and the springboard that the college and the council have created in terms of TAMS fund budgets and the ability to secure Department of Education funding. So just that context, that kind of joint working, that's all behind the scenes and results in the policy that in the main you see in front of you today.
That's good to hear, thank you. In terms of your earlier concern with the master planning of the site being carried out as a whole, as opposed to presumably the northern and the southern sections separately, is that something that's addressed in the current application?
So the current application is purely for the Institute of Technology building, but it's in accordance with the approved master plan. So it indicates as part of the planning application process that it's in accordance and there's no need to deviate from the plan. What I think is important is we're not contesting that the north and south parts of the site necessarily need two master plans, because they're inherently clear that the council needed to be demonstrated that the southern part of the site was adequate. Where does the red line go in terms of the north and the southern split? And that then some clarity and parameters regarding the northern part of the site. So we don't have an objection to there being a master plan as per the section 106 for the original STEM building. I think our only area of concern is regarding the heritage assets review documents, that whilst we have an adopted master plan, then appear to create an additional hurdle for any approved master plan, any approved planning application to consider, given that there are locally listed buildings identified within the site. And rather than go back through our representation, so you'll see that we've submitted condition surveys, information regarding why we don't think that's appropriate. But I'll just pick up on what Mr. Dillon has said. You know, there are a number of great opportunities. There's a great transition on this site between the residential site within Three Bridges and the town centre. I think all parties are, very keen to make sure that this is a great transitional site. We think there's a great opportunity to contribute to the town centre neighbourhood, and to be able to look at circa the density that's suggested within the local plan. But there just needs to be the degree of flexibility that Mr. Dillon has reconfirmed this morning in regard to where do you get to with the final design, what did the market demand and market forces require, how is that influenced by parking, landscaping, etc. So in principle everything is agreed, it's just when you get down to the detail of a planning application, how will that then be discussed and brought forward?
Thank you. Mr. Warren, please.
Yes, just to, I suppose, give a council perspective on the issue about the local listing question that Mrs. Holloway raised. So, in 2021, we consulted on a proposed update to our local list in terms of locally listed buildings. We included within that two buildings which are located on the northern section of the site. So there's a lecture theatre. I understand you. The college provided evidence about the lack of recent use of that building, as well as the D block, which is a building. The building you can see if it's the sight line along Queensway. So yes, yes. So we include as part of that. Those were proposed, and those proposals were informed by evidence, sort of a study by place services by heritage consultants. So that's that process. We did the consultation. We received responses from various parties. I think for reasons of team capacity as much as anything, that process hasn't sort of come to a resolution yet. Within the master plan, I think the work on the master plan was going on concurrently with that consultation, and I think there is recognition within parts of the master plan that those proposals were being consulted on. So, that I can appreciate from the perspective of wanting a kind of clean sheet approach to the site. That is from the perspective of the college. That is I can see why that might be something that they would be concerned about. I think from our perspective, I guess one thing in our minds is that in matters of heritage, we need to be led by the heritage evidence and by sort of heritage-related criteria, really. And we set out in the heritage part of the plan and the policy on locally listed buildings, what the criteria are that are informed by the place services evidence, what the approach would be in a development management context. If a decision was to be made to proceed with those local listings, that would be something that would then have to be considered as part of consideration of the proposals for the site. But we don't see that. We don't see those as being a kind of in principle obstacle to the master plan as a whole, or to the allocation as a whole, or the development quantum that, in terms of housing there, for example, that we're envisaging.
Sorry, if I could just add to that. Just to follow on from that point, I mean, good design can optimize numbers and protect heritage and character. It may be more inconvenient, more expensive, but that's very important, and particularly we're trying to retain as much heritage of the town centre that we have evidence for, that can be justified as possible. And there were 2 buildings on that site when we looked at the master plan that were identified and evidenced then in the heritage statements. But the master plan does have enough flexibility to deliver the floor areas that are intended in many different configurations and different arrangements. I'd also say, in addition to the heritage evidence, that it's very clear, and as set out in CL2, how the new National Model Design Code emphasises, the National Design Guide emphasises the headings of identity and context, and how these are 2 of the most important characteristics of, they're 2 of the 10 characteristics of good design. And this is quite heavily referenced now in the NPPF, and of course words like beauty are introduced, but without going down that road, character and identity are very important. And yes, the master plan has flexibility, as Suzanne referenced, but it is within parameters, key structuring parameters that were outlined in the master plan. I think there was 1 to 4F, quite a few of them, which dealt with the overarching issues that the master plan is trying to achieve. So the master plan is indicative, it's not prescriptive, but it is set within key structuring principles. And I would say as well, if they are looked at, they are based and they do align with what the National Model Design Code sets out. Of course, we don't have a design code developed for the town centre yet. That is our intention, and we've begun that process. But we do have one. We have the national one, which is the default position. So very much those structuring principles align with the National Model Design Code. Flexibility, but within certain criteria.
Thank you. Ms Holloway, in your view, does the master plan provide the flexibility that I've heard?
I would like to think so. So yes, I mean, we have all openly had discussion that it's a set of parameters and that there is a potential process to amend the master plan as further detailed work and studies continue, which is what's currently going on behalf of my client. They are looking at space utilisation, curriculum changes, all types of things that may require changes and addendums to the master plan. And both parties, I believe, are very clear that addendums to the master plan or another approved master plan is an opportunity. I think I would, if I may, sir, just like to go back. The wording of HA1 and HA5 is fairly clear that any locally listed buildings or heritage assets are, the default is that they should be maintained and in exceptional circumstances removed. And I think our clients are just wanting clarity to say that in order to maximise and optimise town centre sites, as we wish to do so, in cooperation with the council, that issues in terms of car parking, landscaping design, of course, are a given at the time of the planning application in terms of us all working together. But clearly, if other issues are then obstructing in terms of our optimisation, then we need to be all clear about what that actually means in terms of potential delivery.
I'm happy to address that now because it will shorten this afternoon's discussion. So, Mr. Dillon, is there, in terms of the flexibility that HA5 in particular, I think, offers with locally listed buildings and the requirement to keep facades, is there sufficient flexibility remaining within the fact that it's a non-designated category?
Well, I would say specific to these buildings, because they relate to the Newtown, that the Newtown structures are very different to, again, using the High Street as an example, more historic buildings in the High Street. It sounds unfair to say that the High Street or the Newtown structures are often to do with the facades and the overall form, but they were designed. The design came from in the 1940s and 50s when there was a lot less money, so they are often skin deep, and it's about the form and the proportion. There is a lot of scope with these buildings for significant change to the rear, and that isn't talking about facadism, but there isn't so much going on behind. There is flexibility within these policies for significant change. You can build around, over, behind these kind of. We're open to this in these specific heritage areas, Newtown heritage. It depends on which category of heritage you would be talking about. So there's flexibility, but it's to try and to retain what has been proven with evidence. Sorry, what we have identified through evidence is an asset to try and retain the aesthetic on its main facades and the proportion. And I think that is a lot of flexibility. It is more complicated, more expensive to do than just razing to the ground, of course, but that is the value of heritage and character that we're trying to retain. I don't know if that answers it enough, but Ian might be able to elaborate on the flexibility a little bit more.
Yes, I suppose just to say policy HA5 on locally listed buildings, I mean, I know you sort of set questions about that as part of the MIQs that we responded to. That sets tests or criteria to be applied as part of by the decision maker in a development management setting with regard to locally listed buildings, and we think that the way that policy is set out is proportionate to a non-designated heritage asset. And we're not saying that locally listed buildings have to be preserved in all circumstances. At the same time, demolition is towards the sort of higher end of the spectrum in terms of harm to the significance of those assets. So there's a sort of judgment exercise for the decision maker to weigh up the harm to a non-listed, a non-designated heritage asset with the wider benefits of the scheme and the nature of what's proposed. So that's not saying that we can say, we're happy to sort of in the context of a local plan examination say we would in principle accept loss of locally listed buildings, but just to recognise that there's a significant sort of planning judgment exercise that needs to happen at the development management stage.
And a discussion to be had as well. So, yes, please.
Thank you, sir. We're not trying to prejudge any development management stage. We totally understand that there are discussions that need to be had as the projects evolve. I think just in the contents of the local plan and the questions on your agenda, sir, about are there areas that would consider or constrain optimising opportunities, I think it's the right agenda and the right forum to have that discussion. I wonder, sir, I can't see that the master plan forms part of the evidence base. I may be wrong, but I wondered if it would assist you both if option layouts of the building as they've been approved might assist.
It would, if the council is okay with that.
potentially therefore can see the overlay of where the
Yep.
buildings are that are listed and where the optimal parameters.
Yep, that's fine. I'm not inviting any comment on the master plan, we can do that here, but yes, it would be useful for me to see that, so if that could be provided as part of the evidence base, that would be useful.
I just, sorry.
Yeah, we're happy to add that. Yeah.
Thank you.
Sorry, sir, just one more point. I just thought it might be helpful to understand for context. I spoke very early on about the investment required by the Crawley College or Chichester College Group in order to maintain its educational provision on the southern part of the site, and we're all clear that that's what all parties want to achieve. One of the things that has changed since the master plan is that the ONS has changed its specification in terms of borrowing opportunities that are available to the college as a further education investment. Those pots of funding have changed. The designation now is not a private landowner but a public one, which means that there's more and more pressure on the local provider, education provider, to be able to dispose of the northern part of the site purely to reinvest in the southern part of the site. So there are no other pots of money or funds other than those that we've already secured in terms of Towns Fund that will be coming forward. The STEM building and the Institute of Technology have been able to maximise those platforms and those opportunities, but they are now ceasing to exist. So the college, as my clients just requested, that we make that very clear, that really the disposal from the north is the only way that they can reinvest in the south.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
I noticed in the updated strategic flood risk assessment that there's a risk of surface water drainage flooding in the south side of the campus. Is that an issue for the future planning of the site?
As with any planning application site specific, sir, it's something that we'd need to demonstrate to mitigation at the development management stage, but we are aware of that situation.
Thank you. Just to assist me, maybe more than anybody else in the room, in terms of the master plan that I think the council is now going to provide, it's described as an agreed master plan. Is that a master plan that the council's signed off at an officer level, or is it something you've taken to your members for formal approval? What status does it have, other than being sort of described as agreed?
Do you want me to take that one?
I can confirm, sir, that that's been signed off at chief officer level, so it has formal approval within the council.
And just so I can be clear in terms of what the college are requesting in terms of any sort of further modification, as you outlined at the start, Ms Holloway, in terms of some additional text, just so I'm clear, is this additional text to the council's new paragraph? I think it will be 1127 or...
It is got far too many pages available, but there's just, I think it's the second sentence saying, where it says it's underutilised, we would say that they're no longer fit for purpose. But I have a copy with me today, and I'm assuming the normal conduit through Charlotte, but we can provide that to the council today and then further as part of any main mods. But it's only a one-line change, sir.
And in terms of what the council's seeking, in terms of that additional paragraph, there's Mr Masson to assist on this point. I mean, this is a clarification, really, in terms of
Yeah,
TC3.
I think in terms of the modifications we're suggesting, I think one of the things, as Mrs Holloway says, it's the role of the master plan is to allow for the redevelopment of part of the site whilst ensuring that the sort of the principal educational function of the site is retained. The modification, I think, is in part to really clarify that there was a master plan, because I think, as worded, the policy made it suggest that there wasn't a plan in place and there needed to be one. And I think the other point is, so we made the modification to say there is a master plan in place, but again, also we've just added the scope for that to be amended as well, in case there are changes at a future point. So that's the key elements. I mean, we're happy to look at if there is suggested alternative wording to our modification. We can have a look at that as well.
Yes, please.
Thank you, sir. Sorry, I found my piece of paper. It literally says, Crawley College has a significant amount of accommodation on its campus which is unfit for purpose, and as well as poorly configured, results in poor utilisation of space. That's the only change, but we have it here and I'm happy to share. But I would just say that we do endorse the inclusion of an additional paragraph, A, to demonstrate the master plan exists, and B, that there's a potential to amend. So we endorse the principle of the wording.
Okay, is there any more discussion on Crawley College that anyone would like to engage in? Okay. We don't have that much more to discuss on this matter, but I am mindful that we've been going for 90 minutes. Mr. Masson, sorry.
Sorry, it was actually just, I think you mentioned earlier about some of the town centre investment funding, discussing that. I was actually intending to pass over to Mr. Smith on that, if that's okay.
Yes, please.
So I can provide you with an overview of the town centre regeneration policy, if you like, sirs, and also the reasons why the council has put that in place. So, as has already been said, the town centre has been experiencing decline in the retail base, and the long-term trend for vacancy rates is in an upwards direction, particularly post-COVID. And as has already been mentioned, our vacancy rate is notably above the South East regional average. So this is the reason why the council's taken positive and proactive steps to set up a town centre regeneration programme policy with wide-ranging support from the local business community and local stakeholders. That policy, in fact, has been in place since 2016, and it was refreshed in 2019 and then again in 2022 post-COVID. So the overarching purpose of the town centre regeneration policy is to revitalise the town centre and secure its sustainable economic future by delivering regeneration schemes that will protect the existing retail base, very importantly, and also unlock sustainable growth in town centre footfall and economic activity. So we've drawn up that programme with partners, key partners such as the County Council, the Business Improvement District. The Council has been very successful working with them in securing significant public funding investment to start delivering that programme. And that's been funding investment through the Crawley Growth Programme via the Local Enterprise Partnership, but also more recently the Crawley Towns Fund programme. And key reasons as to why the government is investing that money into Crawley Town Centre is precisely to protect the existing jobs and retail base in view of the challenges that the town centre is faced with, and to help work with the council sustain its sustainable growth. There are twin visions for the town centre regeneration programme. First, the development of a sustainable business growth hub to unlock new commercial space investment in order to protect, consolidate and expand the town centre's professional services business base. That's a really important key non-retail source of employment, and in terms of daytime spend and footfall is very important to the economic activity of the town centre. Second, just as importantly, the development of the town centre as a bold and vibrant new neighbourhood, a major new location for residential development and new homes. As is stated in the local plan, as many as 3,000 homes in the new neighbourhood is envisaged, 1,000 already completed and 1,900 more, over 1,000 more already completed and 1,900 more envisaged. But fundamental to attracting this residential and commercial space investment is the regeneration of the town centre's public realm, its transport and its highway infrastructure, and its amenity spaces and facilities. And so the town centre regeneration programme comprises a number of different regeneration schemes. So this policy has acted as a platform to attract over £46 million of public funding investment into the town centre. And this regeneration programme is very much live and ongoing and at a very critical stage. And this is where obviously the local plan policies are really important to help continue that. So the 46 million is being invested in public realm improvements, particularly having already been achieved in Queen Square, in the square at the heart of the town centre and its connector streets, obviously part of the retail core. Secondly, the Eastern Gateway and the Station Gateway schemes are public realm and key improvements to cycle routes and pedestrian route connectivity between the town centre core and the town centre's key opportunity sites, which is obviously set out in policy in the local plan, on the town centre periphery at Station Gateway, Telford Place, county buildings, etc. The Eastern Gateway scheme has been completed. That's the paving and upgrades along the western side of the boulevard and along College Road that you can already see, and the Station Gateway scheme, which incorporates public rail and bus station improvements, will be implemented next year and is going to planning for a planning application submission in the spring. Thirdly, major transport interchange investment. I mentioned earlier that the working together with Network Rail and with Aurora, £6 million has been invested in new railway station facilities at Crawley College, and significant investment, as I mentioned, envisaging the new bus station facilities next year. And working with the West Sussex County Council, we will be bidding for further funds from DFT to invest in more bus lane infrastructure along Station Way in front of the railway station. And fourthly, as has already been mentioned, major programmes of modernisation of Crawley Further Education Campus, as has already been delivered, the STEM Centre, and is in the process of coming forward as a planning application, has been submitted as a planning application, the Institute of Technology. So all of this investment is playing a critical role in the survival of the town centre as a retail core, and is in the process of attracting new retail investment. And that's key because it's bucking the long-term trend of retail decline and the uplift in retail unit vacancy rate. So the likes of Decathlon, as you've already mentioned, sir, have come into the Queen Square, and they have made it clear to us that that was directly as a consequence of the council investment in the public realm in Queen Square and the council's town centre regeneration policy. Also, the likes of Metro Bank and Dunelm, Peacocks, Barclays and HMV have all also invested in that retail core, again off the back of the town centre regeneration programme. So there's an excellent opportunity for the new local plan policies to help the council sustain the momentum that it has created by the town centre regeneration programme policy, to continue the much needed retail investment in the retail core, catalyse that, and to boost the quality of the offer that we have in terms of retail, to attract people to live in the town centre and to attract commercial space investment, because we recognise there is an interdependence. It is a virtuous circle. The better the quality of the retail we can attract, the more likely we are to attract commercial space investment and residential investment, and vice versa. Residential investment, commercial space investment generates the footfall to then attract the retail investment, and that's why the council that's why the council has put this regeneration programme in place. And they're the arguments that we've been able to persuade government for to successfully draw in that £46 million to invest in that regeneration programme. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. That's useful information. Mr. Spencer.
Just to clarify that figure, is it 46 million, Mr. Smith? I got from sort of background reading, was it 21 million from the government's towns fund? Was there then separate funding from the LEP, or?
Yeah, the Towns Fund programme, the total Towns Fund programme allocation was actually, including accelerator money, is £22.1 million, but that is a borough-wide intervention. The Crawley Growth Programme investment is £49 million now public funding, in addition to private sector investment. But what I have identified for you is the money that is from both programmes be specifically focused on Crawley Town Centre.
Thanks. We've only got about 10 or 15 minutes to go, but I am mindful that we've been going for a while and people need a comfort break. So I suggest a short 5-minute break, and we'll start again once everyone's back in the room.
Okay, good morning, and it's still good morning. We'll now resume the hearings. I think everybody's back. On item 9 on the agenda, we're looking at some of the component sites that obviously key town centre opportunities under policy TC3. In terms of the sites and understanding, they fit in with, I think from our perspective, the overall figure that's been identified is 1,500 additional units as a broad kind of capacity figure for the town centre area. In terms of that 1,500 sort of composite figure, can the council just briefly outline or explain, is that the sum of the opportunity sites, or is there some additional capacity that then adds in and builds on that up to that 1,500 number?
It is the sum of the opportunity sites.
So in terms of the figure I think we heard earlier of 1,900, so that then builds in some additional capacity above and beyond the opportunity sites. So is that a blend of kind of existing other consents on smaller sites and potential of the windfall that gets to that higher figure of 19? I think Mr. Smith referred to 1,900, giving you the overall sort of 3,000 over the sort of broadly the plan period.
Yeah, so that sounds like the combination of the key town centre opportunity sites, other town centre sites that are in the housing trajectory as identified. Yeah.
And I appreciate we discussed the housing trajectory in large part yesterday. I'm mindful there are some towns, obviously there are town centre opportunity sites, hopefully not treading on Mr. Rolling's toes too much, but just if we can just look at some of the key town centre opportunity sites, a number of them are sort of profiled beyond the sort of first 5 years of the plan. I don't know if the council can just sort of advise whether that's a suitably cautionary approach or whether there's an anticipation that some of the sites, I'm looking at particularly the Crawley College is profiled within sort of mid part of the plan period, the county building sites and the Mocha sites were all beyond the 5-year period, and whether that's a reasonable approach to take or whether the council is just being potentially sort of sitting on the cautious side of things as to when those sites are likely to yield.
Yes, I mean, in respect of those 3 sites, it's a case of being cautious, as you say, particularly in light of the point about deliverability within the NPPF glossary, and bearing in mind that, I mean, in relation to the college site and county buildings, that those sites are sort of still not come as forward as planning applications as yet. It doesn't preclude. I mean, one difficulty I guess we have in kind of profiling our housing suppliers, we might say a particular site counts as developable rather than deliverable on the basis of the evidence at a given point in time, but that doesn't mean that it can't come forward earlier. In relation to the Mocha site, I think at the stage where we were kind of doing the housing trajectory, there was a consent that was sort of about to expire basically, and we weren't sure what was going to happen there. As it happens, they sort of started demolition works and kind of kept it going. It's possible that it may come forward earlier. Equally, I know there have been sort of discussions in relation to that site in terms of viability in current circumstances. So I think on a precautionary basis, there's a risk of kind of putting too much in the first 5 years and and you know it doesn't happen. So I think you come to a judgment about which ones are likely to be sooner and which not. So that's the basis of that. But Clem, I think, wants to say something.
Thank you, sir. I think there are, looking at the three sites broadly, I think there are three important reasons as to why it's sensible to be precautionary. Firstly, the impact that the COVID pandemic had particularly on Crawley's economy, and I know certainly anecdotally that has set back investment opportunities on particular sites. Secondly, the advent of water neutrality, where there are sites that are still yet to come forward to planning. That's obviously going to require a lot more careful thought and preparation and a lot of intense work, which will take time to achieve water neutrality. And thirdly, currently the kind of more uncertain state in relation to the economic circumstances. Again, anecdotally, I'm aware that there have been some issues in relation to confirming investment and investment that's been paused or pushed back as a consequence of uncertainties. So the feedback is that the investment is in the pipeline, but there is some reticence for that to come forward in this immediate term.
Thank you. And just following up on that in terms of some of these sites, so the county building site that's obviously just over the way, I mean, are some of these sites within public ownership or control, or are they now pretty much firmly in the hands of the private sector to kind of bring forward?
In relation to county buildings, that's a site that's owned by West Sussex County Council, and we are in conversations with West Sussex currently about them bringing forward proposals. That's at a very early stage, but they are intimating that they will be wanting to bring those proposals forward in the near future.
And just going back, sorry, Mr. Smith, whilst you're on the microphone, in terms of the funding that was identified just before we took the break, I'm right in thinking that is wholly for public realm infrastructure improvements. It's not to kind of assist viability or bring any particular sites forward within the town centre in terms of key town centre sites. It's to create the environment that will facilitate and enable that investment.
That's correct. It's very much about boosting the quality of the living stroke business environment, improving the sites in the sense of their connectivity, pedestrian, cyclist, transport-wise, with the core of the town centre and their cohesion with the rest of the town centre, but then enabling the landowners to be able to progress that more quickly and more readily, and attract private investors to work with them to secure that investment.
So come to Crawley College next, and then Ms. Lepage. So Crawley College, in terms of, I'm looking at the profile of when the council's anticipating development to come forward on the northern part of your site, if that's a reasonable kind of profile.
So just really to give you some more context, as I indicated earlier, we're undertaking a number of studies that will provide additional detailed information. My client's intention is that there would be a planning application coming in within 12 months. Clearly the planning application helps provide market signals in terms of certainty and transparency about what a potential developer or disposal may look like. And so we're comfortable with the 0 to 5 year potential trajectory. We're currently working to get an application, and we'll be coming back to the council as soon as we've had our first studies back. So there will be ongoing working, but yes, that 0 to 5 or 5 years is yeah, we hope to be able to front load that if we can.
I do need to raise this, trying to remember the geography. Is the Crawley College site, are you within the water neutrality? I'm trying to think of the
We are, sir, which is one of the issues obviously that we've been discussing in terms of the Institute of Technology and then the wider site. So there will need, I was going to raise it before Mr. Smith did, but yes, there's obviously extra complexities within our site.
Ms. Lepage, please. thank you for that. I think that concludes what I was going to raise.
Thanks. Yeah, we're just about done. So, okay. So, just a couple of site-specific questions. Is the position on Overline House still the same as per the statement? And does that count towards the 1,500 figure at all?
It does count towards the 1,500 figure. So the situation is, I think, as we've said, that there's the outline application. Originally, that envisaged the demolition of Overline House and the erection of new residential development, as well as new station in the form of a series of blocks. So that proposal has subsequently changed. So there's the reserved matters application for the purely residential blocks that has got resolution to grant permission subject to section 106, including water neutrality. The proposal in relation to Overline House changed, so it's retaining the existing building and converting it essentially. So that's the kind of change in respect of the from the perspective of the outline application as far as the development capacity is concerned.
Okay, thank you. And does the removal of Zurich House from the policy have any impact on the 1,500 figure?
No, that because it's not one of the key town centre sites, that doesn't count.
Okay, what's the current status with Cross Keys, the Cross Keys site, please, as it's unpermitted? Is there any movement on that?
So that site is a proportion of it, potentially most of it, is owned by by Crawley Borough Council. I'm aware that there have been various sort of work streams going on in relation to it. It hasn't yet come to the point of a planning application being submitted, and it is a slightly tricky site in terms of the heritage constraints around it. So that's the reason for the sort of low development yield in terms of residential provision that we've got in there. So so there's no sort of very recent news from a kind of the perspective of engagement with the development management process that I'm able to share, and hence why we've got that site sort of happening some years down the line. Yes, I don't know if any of my colleagues who are sort of on the sort of more corporate side of things would add anything to that, but that's my understanding.
Thank you. Mr. Smith.
Just to note, there have been in the recent past planning applications that have come in for that particular site, but in view, as has already been said, in view of the proximity to significant heritage in the shape of St John's Baptist Church, I believe it's 14th century church, the ability for that to come forward in an acceptable manner is quite challenging, and in fact that application was refused because it failed to meet the criteria.
Thank you. And the only other site that I have a question on is the upper floors of 7 to 13, the Broadway, and 1 to 3 Queen's Square, where you're looking to regularise a consent that was carried out under a previous approval. Is that process underway?
Not that I'm aware of. So that's a somewhat complicated situation, really, where there was a planning permission, but it was implemented after it had technically expired. There have been, I know there has been exchanges from the enforcement team in relation to it. You know, it's been completed and, as we understand, is occupied, and but it remains at present unregularised. I mean, we would, presume that will occur at some stage. Yes.
Was that a greater or lesser quantum than the subsequent application in terms of housing numbers?
So the quantum that we've got in the housing trajectory is what was in the application that expired but was subsequently implemented. So yes, we would prefer to have been in a situation where we could kind of tick that off the list essentially, but because of the sort of planning status, it's slightly complicated that.
No problem. You'll be aware as well that the town planning representation on that site had questions about town centre mix and housing mix in the town centre, but I think we covered that sufficiently yesterday.
Oh, sorry, I think I may have confused things slightly there. So the representation we had, I think, was for the Poundland site, the sort of Queen Square one side, and the
I've done the same thing.
So there are two different sites. It's 7 to 13 the Broadway, and 1 to 3 Queen Square is the kind of one to be regularised. Then the site in relation to which we've had the representations is I forget the exact numbers, but it's Queen Square on one side and the Boulevard on the other side. I think it's the Poundland.
It's to the east of Poundland.
Oh, to the east of Poundland. So that there aren't any formal planning proposals for that at this stage, but they have obviously participated in the local plan process.
Right. My apologies to anyone listening to the recording involved in that site then. Does the council have any comments on the representations that were made in that regard?
I think some of it we picked up yesterday, didn't we, in relation to the housing mix and that aspect. So we didn't agree with them really in terms of that. There was a point made in that representation as well about that we should uplift the windfalls to take account of the change in local plan period, and we didn't think that was justified because the additional year is the year that we're in. There were some comments about the implications of the conservation area. I can't remember the exact wording that was used, but broadly speaking, as I was saying earlier, we don't think that the conservation area is kind of preventing new development, residential development within those boundaries. So we would certainly give consideration to proposals on a site like that, but it would just be we would have to consider the impact and the design and so on. But in principle, we are supportive of appropriate sort of schemes on those kinds of sites in the town centre.
Mr. Dillon, please. Thank you.
Yeah, just to add to that, we're not introducing anything that is outside of what the NPPF mandates or in national design guidance, because I think the respondent talked about our policies being too prescriptive. We have flexibility, and read as a whole, the plan offers a flexible approach to support a range of development typologies. But again, I referred earlier to a site-by-site basis, that no two sites are the same. Ian already touched on the windfall matter that they raised as well. Another matter they may be referring to is the requirements for space standards, which comes up, I think, later on in matter 8 as well. But again, we do make recommendations in DD3 for how to improve the quality of residential units in the town centre, but they're not prescriptive. It's a recommendation. And one other point that's mentioned is in regard to car parking. And we'd say again, we also touched on this earlier, the flexibility in the town centre, and that a more nuanced approach to car parking is needed than if you're building a 2-bed semi-detached or a 3-bed semi-detached in the suburbs. There can be car ownership. There's many options for that, but it doesn't mean that people will necessarily use their car all the time. So that was the third major issue that they raised. But to be a bit more creative in how you may provide car parking for your prospective renters or buyers, it may mean car parking adjoining, nearby, on site, or people might choose just not to buy a car parking space, as has been evidence in schemes that have come forward. And actually in that regard, I think the MOCA scheme as well, which has been granted permission, is another car-free scheme in the town centre which uses car club options. So that has been proven as being attractive to developers. I mean, I can go further if you've got more specific questions on what they raised.
That's fine. Thank you very much. Is there any other discussion on this matter that anyone would like to, any other questions people would like to raise? Yes, Ms. Holloway.
Thank you, Sarah. Are you referring to question 10 on the agenda, or am I jumping ahead? Okay, I will wait.
Yep, and no, any other issues?
The only other point that hasn't come up, and in regard to the modifications, is one of the reasons why we've suggested alternative wording for the college site, is in relating to sustainability in the whole and the issues of water neutrality, which Mr. Smith and myself have previously mentioned as a constraint or an issue that needs to be considered, particularly in build cost, in terms of time frame, etc. So I think we've covered those today and at the water neutrality session. One of the points my client would like us to make is just regarding the non-fit for purpose element of the northern part of the site is enabling a fantastic opportunity for us in terms of sustainability as a whole. And all the new buildings, DFE requirements and their own climate change emergency requirements for Chichester College Group as a whole are looking forward to making sure that the building's fit for purpose, that net zero, operationally, etc. And I think it's just important to recognise then the relationship with the decentralised energy network and all of the policies under the climate change and sustainability banner that are for another discussion another days, but just that the college fully support those. And just for context, the STEM building has been future-proofed, ready for the decentralised energy network. The IoT with the current planning application does the same, and it's the college's intent that they would continue to do so on both the northern and the southern part of the site. I just wanted to raise that in relation to the suggested modifications.
Thank you. Any comment from the council?
I think, just as mentioned before, we're happy to have a look at what's suggested in terms of the modifications and look at if there's amendments to the wording that can be made.
Yes, I guess on the point about sustainability, we're mindful that it's an area of kind of debate within planning currently about how, in circumstances of demolishing buildings, how you weigh the impact in terms of retained carbon against the performance of newer, better performing buildings. I'm sure you know about the Marks and Spencer decision. So we take the point that newer buildings will be to a better environment, will perform better in environmental terms, but we're aware of the other side of the discussion as well.
Thank you. Is there any other discussion that people would like to engage in on this matter? Right then, thank you. We'll have a lunch break and return at 2 o'clock on matters of character and design and heritage, followed by flooding, noise and similar issues, environmental issues. Thank you.
Needs to be plugged in more.
Yeah.
Some of them aren't.
Literally, that's all you needed to do.
So now it is. Looks like it's a
Yeah, so you've got to see that it's green up there as well.
I could hear you. So.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, it's because...
Yeah.
We've worked it out.
Sorry, he's shouting.